Part 1 is an interview, which is pretty standard for a speaking test. In the interview, the examiner is going to ask you personal, general questions about your work or your studies, your free time, your holidays, your future plans, your daily life, stuff like that. And to be honest, some of the questions seem kind of simple, like, where are you from? Are you working or studying? What kind of music do you listen to? These are A2 questions, but don't be fooled, okay? It's a trick. And if you know anything about Cambridge exams, they like to be tricky. This is an advanced exam, so you need to make sure your answers are C1 answers. And what that means essentially is that you need to upgrade. So to upgrade is to improve the quality of something or change it for something newer or better. So in life, we usually upgrade things like a computer system, a mobile phone contract, or a seat on the plane. But you can also upgrade your vocabulary, and I'm going to show you how. Now, if you want to do well in the speaking exam, you can start by avoiding basic words. So I'm talking about things like nice, good, like, hate. These are basic words. These are A2 words. Remember, you need to upgrade your vocabulary so that it's right for the level. So take a look at these sentences and think about how you could upgrade them. All right, so pause the video and press play when you're ready to look at some ideas. Okay, so you've come up with your ideas. Now let's take a look at mine. So instead of saying I like something, you could say I am fond of something or I am keen on something. Instead of saying you hate something, you could say you can't stand it or you can't bear it. And a better way of saying that you don't like mornings is you could say, I'm not a morning person. So this is a cool idiomatic expression to show your preferences. I'm not a cat person. I'm not a coffee person. You get the idea. So to be snowed under, it means to have too much to do. So this is a great phrasal verb to show that you are really overworked or overwhelmed. And finally, unwind is a nice synonym for relax. So you could substitute that and then automatically upgrade your answer. Let's take a look now at some questions the examiner could ask you on the topic of leisure time. So look at the exam style questions and then at the rather basic responses. Focus on that language that is underlined and try to think of a way that you could upgrade it to make it more appropriate for C1. Okay, so pause the video and press play when you're ready to check my ideas. All right, well, let's have a quick look at my ideas. Yours might be a bit different, and that's okay too. But instead of saying something like, I tried to read a book, you could say, I tried to catch up on my reading. Because to catch up on something, it's to make time to do something that you haven't been able to do recently. And then instead of saying I'm interested in, you could say I'm fanatical about. And also, instead of saying I always watch, you could spin it and you could say, oh, well, I never miss my team's matches. So these are just a few ways that you can upgrade those answers to make them a little bit fancier and a little bit better for C1. Now, let's talk a little bit about the G word. Yep, I'm talking about grammar. So are you a grammar geek like me? Do you get excited when learning about participle clauses, or do you hate it? So does even the mention of the word grammar make you feel stressed? Well, either way, at some point, I'm sure you've used things like tenses, modals, verb patterns, relative clauses, and conditionals, stuff like that. You might not know how to name these grammar forms, but for the advanced exam, you better be able to use them. You see, you won't do well in the speaking test if you only use simple tenses and structures. To pass the test, you've got to show that your understanding and your use of grammar are at C1 level, just like your vocabulary. So therein lies the challenge, huh? How are you supposed to do that in 2 minutes? Well, again, you've got to upgrade. Like before, let's take a look at these exam style questions. These ones are all on the topic of holidays and travel. And now take a look at the rather basic responses. So focus on the text that is underlined, and as we did previously, try and think of ways that you could maybe upgrade them by using a more appropriate grammar structure. Okay, so pause the video and press play when you're ready to have a look at my ideas. Okay, so I was thinking that in the first one, because the original statement said I imagine, if you're talking about an imaginary situation, then it's a perfect time to show you can use the second conditional, right? So you could say, if I had the chance, I would love to be a flight attendant. I also added an interesting little expression there. So I'd leap at the opportunity to. This shows that you would take the chance. It would be something that you would be very happy to do. In the second one, instead of saying I plan to, we can use the future continuous. So you could say I'll be traveling. And also I changed I really like into I'm really into, just because it's a more suitable expression. Now, you'll see as well, I've added 2 adverbs. So absolutely to show enthusiasm, and actually to kind of fact check. So it's really good if you can to use these sort of adverbs in speaking, because they do add a lot of color to your answers. To explain what I mean by don't go off on a tangent, I want to tell you just a quick little story. Many years ago, I went on what could be described as the world's worst date. So I asked this guy a question, and then he spoke uninterrupted for about half an hour, like talking about this and that, and he jumped around. And the funny part is that in those 30 minutes, he never actually answered my question. Now, obviously, I didn't get the chance to say one word, so I pretended that my cat was sick, and then I ran out of the pub. The truth is, I don't have a cat. So as you can see, to go off on tangents on a date is terrible, but in a speaking test, it's even worse. So if you start talking about a completely new topic, or you jump from point to point in a really chaotic way, then the examiner might think you haven't understood their questions, or that you haven't listened to them. And in either case, it's not good. So to do well in the speaking test, you need to stay focused and you need to stick to the topic. Okay, now it's over to you. So why don't you write your answers to these exam style questions in the comments section below. Take a look at these questions. They are exactly the kind of things the examiner might ask you, and it's good practice in being focused and sticking to the topic. So write your answers in the comment section, and the first commenters will get some feedback on their responses. So get writing, press pause and press play when you're ready to go on. Becoming a teacher, I used to work in one of those big corporations. You know, the kind in a skyscraper with like 40 floors. So the one morning I'm waiting for the lift, and the director of the company comes to stand next to me. And then we get into the lift together. The doors close and we just stand there. And I watch the elevator starting to go up. 1, 2, 3. Oh my goodness, it's moving so slowly, and there's like 30 more floors to go. And I don't know if I should say something, or if I should wait for him to say something, or if it's okay just to say nothing. Ugh, so we just stand in this uncomfortable silence all the way up to the 35th floor. And I'm so happy when the doors finally ping open again and I can be out of that situation, because it's just so awkward. So awkward is that situation that makes someone feel a bit worried, a bit embarrassed, or very uncomfortable. And awkward silence is definitely not a good thing in the exam. When you don't quite understand someone's question, or you don't know what to say, it is a common reaction to stay silent. But saying nothing is just about the worst thing you can do in the speaking test. It's very awkward. It's better to say something, even if you make a mistake, than to sit in silence and stare at the examiner. Fortunately, there is a solution, and that is to learn to use some filler expressions. So these expressions help you to buy time when you don't know how to answer the examiner's question. So you could say things like, oh, that's an interesting question, or let me think about that. Well, you see, or I never really thought about that before, but. So these are just some filler expressions. I'm interested to know if you can think of any more. So pause the video, go down to the comments section, and write down the filler expressions you think you could use in your advanced exam. Have you ever memorized a poem or a speech or a sonnet from Shakespeare? There are times when memorizing text is really a good thing. However, the speaking test is not one of those times. The examiners want you to speak naturally, just like you would in real life. It's usually very easy to tell when someone has memorized their answers. It's like they're trying to rephrase the question to the one they want to answer. Do you know what I mean? So honestly, besides what's your name and where are you from, any questions and answers that you try to memorize probably won't come up in the test. So it's much better to learn fixed expressions that you can use to talk about lots of stuff rather than trying to memorize full answers. Okay, so I've made a list of the fixed phrases for advanced that I think could really help you in your speaking test. So make a note of these. They are phrases that can be used to talk about a variety of different topics and that can be used to answer a variety of different questions. So for example, I could say, I'm really into tennis, or I'm really into traveling, or I'm really into playing League of Legends with my mates at the weekend. Another expression, I'm a massive fan of heavy metal, or Manchester United, or any film directed by Wes Anderson. And how about with the negative? So for example, I can't stand tofu or ironing or people who are clearly lying about their lives on Instagram or TikTok. So those are just some examples I can think of to express my preferences. How about yours? So why don't you pause the video and tell us about some of your preferences using some of these fixed expressions in the comments section below. When I was at university, I used to have this old Alfa Romeo, and I loved that car, but my goodness, it was a piece of junk. Like the wipers didn't work, so I couldn't see anything when I was driving in the rain. To open the door, you had to roll down the window and kind of put your arm out and open it from the outside because the handle on the inside didn't work. It sounded like a tractor, so you could hear my car coming from like a mile away. And then one morning, it just didn't start. It had died overnight. So I had to ditch my beloved car. So to ditch means to get rid of something that is no longer wanted. We usually use this word, it's informal, by the way, to talk about things we no longer want or need. But in the context of the speaking test, you need to ditch these one-word short responses. If you give a short answer in the exam, like if the examiner asks you, where are you from? And you just say, Geneva, then you aren't really giving the examiner anything to assess you on, right? So if you say too little, you miss the opportunity to show the examiner your speaking skills. On the other hand, though, if you say too much, then it might be a bit overcomplicated, and the more you complicate things, the more mistakes you could make. So I would say in part 1, aim to give like 2 to 4 sentence answers. This isn't an exact rule, but it is a useful guide. There is one disclaimer to that 2 to 4 sentence guide though. When you answer the first introductory questions, like where are you from, are you working or studying, to give an answer like this, it's enough. You don't want to say too much right at the beginning, and you definitely don't want to give a long pre-prepared monologue. So an answer along these lines would be just about perfect. These birds are parrots, and my grandma had a parrot. Me and my cousins were determined to teach that parrot to say something. So every time we were alone with this parrot, we'd say, "What you doing? What you doing? What you doing?" But it never repeated. Then one day my grandma was looking for a book on the bookshelf, and from behind her she hears, "What you doing?" in this super creepy voice. My poor grandma, bless her, she nearly jumped out of her skin, and we laughed and laughed at that very clever bird. But now to parrot, or to repeat exactly what someone else says, in the speaking test is not so clever. In fact, it's a pretty bad idea, and I'm gonna tell you why. So the thing is, when you parrot someone's question or you parrot what they say, it looks like you don't really understand what they're asking you, or you don't know how to reply to that question. So in the exam, if you're parroting the examiner, then they would think that you really don't know what else to say. So look at this example of a parroted response. You see, it exactly repeats the structure in the present perfect continuous that the examiner has used. So pause the video and try and think of how you could upgrade this answer to make it more natural. Then press play when you're ready to check my suggestion. Instead of saying I've been learning English, you could say I've been studying it. So it is the pronoun, which is much more natural. We don't really kind of repeat the same nouns and questions and answers in English for a while now. And then add a bit of information since about the age of 6. So this is a much more natural response, and it would give the examiner the impression that you're a confident, competent speaker of English, that you don't need to rely on what they've said in order to come up with your own reply. Well, that's going to do it. I hope you're feeling pretty good about speaking part 1. If you do feel like you got something out of this video, please go ahead and click the like button or share this post on your socials. And don't forget to leave your examples of exam style questions, time fillers, and your preferences in the comments section below. We'd love to hear from you.